Welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. We're at week 9. The season is flying along here. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and joined as ever by Judah and Doug. Doug, I mean, the season's hotting up, and you have a novel concept for us that quarterbacks might just matter in this league. So take it away.
Yeah, go figure. It's just ridiculous. We this multi-billion-dollar industry, and obviously we're not privy to every single meeting, every single practice. So you want to give some benefit of the doubt, some deference to these organizations that do so much. But then we see these games on Sunday. It's like, how can Deshaun Watson be the best quarterback on this roster? How can Anthony Richardson? How can they? I mean, there's a reason he was a project coming into the NFL. And it's fine if like Indy sticks with them, but now they're like, you know what, Flacco gives us the best chance to win. I could have told them that in the preseason, right? Why did we have to see this play out? And then with Watson, it's like, are you kidding me? Winston's sitting there all along, and he was the third stringer. Now the Ravens defense is the Ravens defense, but Watson's been terrible all year. So what is going on with these organizations? On one hand, it's like the movie Major League where they're tanking and trying to lose and drive the value of the franchise down. And on the other hand, it's, like Occam's razor. It's just like insane to see some of this rationale, some of the decision making, but we see it every single week. We see it with coaching decisions, whether it be fourth downs, challenges. We see it with the league having these older people run zigzag up the line to spot a ball, and then it's like an inch off. It's like, what are we doing? So it's just kind of comical that we sit here and dissect all this, and it comes down to some just ridiculousness.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think of, Judah, when Doug's talking there. It's Rob Pizzola's famous saying from a few years ago that we bet actual dollars on this league. And when you even see the Commanders and Jayden Daniels, I was in a bar in Dublin, bank holiday weekend, and I just had a quarter of an eye on the last play, knowing nothing was going to happen. And I just saw the ball pop up straight into the hands for a touchdown. It's just insane, absolutely insane. Swung the whole game, obviously, because it was the last play.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, though, is you almost expect the unexpected in the NFL. And like all of this is known, right? And it usually works its way out on both sides. You're going to get some like inexplicable ball spotting. You're going to get some like weird penalties or no calls this, phantom calls there. That's kind of part of betting on this. And it's all known to bettors. This is how the NFL works. In many ways, it makes it, it adds to the appeal, right? The Hail Mary is that is in the cards adds to the excitement, and that no game is over really until the final whistle blows. So I always take my stance of like, I will forever be grateful for all football. I won't complain. We're like, oh, we get a Giants Steelers Monday Night Football game. This is like as bad as it gets. I'm going to be dying for this game in 4 months from now.
That's the beauty of the NFL season. But I follow and cover a lot of sports. I do think the NFL, for as dramatic as it gets, those tight calls, but also, as you touched on, Doug, some of the decisions from management, despite all the money, even just from play by play, it just drives me insane as someone who's followed it for a few years, let alone someone who's getting paid to make these decisions. But anyway, we love it. Dolphins at Bills, Chargers at Browns, Lions at Packers, and Rams at Seahawks are the 4 games we picked out. We'll be doing a bit of any other bets, long shots, and best bets as well. Before we start, if you do take 2 seconds, hit that like button, subscribe or follow where you're watching or listening, and insights.matchbook.com. You'll get a full recap of all the guys' picks. And while we will be covering all the sides that are available on the exchange to check out, and a lot of you are doing the weekly bet builder product, you can bet on the Matchbook betting exchange. Let's start with the Dolphins at the Bills and take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. You can back the Dolphins at 3.45, Bills 138. The Dolphins get a 6-point head start at even money, and the total for this one is 49. So Doug, kick us off here. I mean, is this almost a must-win game for the Dolphins? Because they threw that one away last week. There was a lot of good feel with Tua being back and all. It just felt like a game they should have won, and they didn't.
Yeah, and I think the ship is sort of sailed, so to speak, with the Dolphins. Now, look, this is when I at least play amateur psychologist here and things like that. I just don't know if this is a team that's going to kind of rally and try to make the most of a season. I think this one's like a season loss just based on some of the personalities involved and just the body language expert that I am. But this is more of a bet on the Bills because the number itself is a tax. It's a stupid number. Why would you lay this number? It's such an inefficient sort of bet. But the more I think about it, I just think this Bills team there's a lot to like right now. And I don't know if it's addition by subtraction, getting rid of Stephon Diggs, who's just chirping all the time. And it must be a pain for a quarterback to have to worry about so much with the offense and then also just keeping the superstar wide receiver happy. This team, obviously, very impressive performance in Seattle. Got fortunate bounces early on the goal line by the Seahawks. But I just like how this Bills team's been trucking opponents. And those 2 losses in the middle of the season, they were really ravaged with injuries on defense up the middle, and the Ravens took advantage. And Buffalo was ripe for the beating. And that Texans game, like, look, Allen hit his head on the ground, and it was sort of a weird kind of few minutes. The play calling came into question, but I've been pretty pleased with Buffalo for the most part this season. And I'd rather go into this laying a bigger number than I should on Buffalo, like a 6 instead of a 4.5, than kind of hoping Miami has the right locker and all that stuff, because they've been a mess, particularly, when Tua was out. There's nothing to like right now with this Dolphins team.
Okay, so we're Doug's going for the Bills there. Currently you can lay them -6 at 194. Judah, you lean to Miami, so make the alternative case there first.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what the Bills do so well, defensively especially, is kind of limiting explosive plays. And as kind of the time of the play goes from like 2.5 seconds to 3 seconds, they don't generate a lot of quick pressure. But kind of as the play develops and as their coverage unit kind of locks up onto receivers, they start to generate a lot of pressure then. And kind of the coverage almost works to generate the pass rush and create a lot of the defensive success. And I don't think that style works well against the Dolphins, who when Tua Tagovailoa is playing, get rid of the ball so quickly. I mean, we've seen a bunch of matchups between these two teams, of course, but when Tua is right, and this is how the Dolphins are operating their offense, they're throwing in kind of 2.2 seconds. And I think that means that Tua is going to be throwing from a lot of clean pockets because the Bills do not have anyone who can win that quickly. And especially the Bills are vulnerable over the middle of the field, where I imagine the Dolphins can and do like to attack kind of on these crossing routes with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. We haven't seen yet the results flow, but the Dolphins offense, they had that extremely fluky game in week 2 against the Bills where Tua did get hurt. He also threw a bunch of interceptions, and the game script kind of got all out of whack. But the offense has been good. They were a 0.2 EPA per play team last week, and I see this as a spot where they can continue to have success. At 6.5, the number is just too high, considering how good the Dolphins offense is. We have a pretty large sample of how good this offense is. We're in year 3 of the Tua and McDaniel combo. They're very good. 6.5 is just too much, I think, given the state of the Dolphins offense right now. And there's little by way of matchup that the Bills can do to stop them.
Okay, yeah, so that's a lean for the Dolphins. A strong lean, I would say, at 6, if you're getting 6 or 6.5, and Doug laying those points with the Bills. Let's move on to Chargers at the Browns. Chargers are currently favored here in Cleveland at 185. The Browns 208. The Browns currently getting a 1-point head start on the handicap line, and 42 is the total. Doug, start with you. Again, I mean, a little bit on Chargers. My Chargers, I don't think I've seen them passing the ball as much these last couple of weeks. I mean, Herbert's slowly cooking, would I say? Am I right in that?
Yeah, it's Harbaugh's just being torn in different directions because he's got Justin Herbert, one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, and then he just wants to run the ball, lead the clock. I mean,
that's it, exactly.
That's it. Slow pace. And as much as we all love Jameis, he's still a guy who led the NFL one season interceptions and passing yards, and was, I think, second in passing touchdowns. And we saw the drive and the game-winning touchdown a week ago, but he had the interception as well that was really inexplicable. So it's an experience with Jameis Winston. So I like this as a teaser leg. I think the Chargers want to play these games low scoring. They want to sort of bleed clock, win. So I think if you can get the Browns up over 7 from 2 to 8, and depending on the shop, you got to get -120. Obviously, that's so much more favorable. I think the Browns at home, there's just a little bit of a flat spot. There's a little too much Kool-Aid being drank right now in Cleveland and across the NFL betting landscape. I would just feel much better with +8 in this situation, knowing that the Chargers never really tend to step on anyone's throats, although they did last week.
Okay, yeah, so play that as a teaser leg on the alternative handicaps on Matchbook. Judah, you like the over here. I'm guessing both offenses are slowly getting put together from different areas, and I guess that obviously would lean itself to the over here.
Yeah, I think there are a couple angles here. Number one, the Chargers defense, I think, is still rated by the market as a top unit. And I think a lot of their success had to do with a insanely easy slate of opposing matchups early in the season, which I think is a little bit misguided. I mean, I'm sure you as a Chargers fan know they got it off a little easy to start the season. And I think the market's also kind of slow to adjust to the Browns. It's not just that. Obviously, there's a big upgrade from Watson to Winston, but the offensive line also has gotten significantly healthier. They returned in recent weeks Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller, a lot of kind of the key cogs of a Browns offensive line that for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years has been one of the best units in football and was a disaster early in the season as they were dealing with injuries. I think that's only going to continue to make the Browns successful. They had like a 10% pressure rate allowed last week, one of the best marks all season. Granted, it's not the best Ravens pass rush, but they're not one of the worst. It's certainly notable there. And I think you're absolutely right to talk about the Chargers are operating an entirely different offense than they were before the bye. They passed over expectation, relative to expectation. That's adjusting for context. Obviously, you are less likely to throw when you're up 21-0 than when you're down 21-0. So adjusting for kind of those game state factors, the Chargers they passed 1.5% relative to expectation the first week off the bye, 3% the second week off the bye, 5% the third week off the bye. This is a team that is letting Justin Herbert cook. And that itself, more passes is just going to mean more offense. And when you look at what their total is sitting right now at the second lowest mark of the week, these are two, I think, decent offenses and units on the Chargers defensive side and the Browns offensive side that I don't think the market has quite caught up to just how good they are.
Okay, yeah, sort of like the case there. Over 42 is the current mark at 192. Let's move on to probably game of the week here. Divisional matchup between the Lions, who travel to the Green Bay Packers as 164 favorites. The Packers 242. The Packers are getting a 3-point head start, the same price as Lions to lay the 3 points, and the total here is 48.5. Judah, back to you. I mean, the Detroit Lions, I mean, are they the best team in football right now?
The Lions' offense is a house. But I would be extremely, extremely concerned about the defense. And I think that's kind of they had this great win against the Vikings, though they did allow 29 points. And I think that the Vikings offense is certainly in a different kind of caliber of team, depending on whether or not they are leading or trailing. I think they're much more vulnerable when trailing, but they still allowed 7.6 yards per play to the Vikings. Last week, they had one of the greatest special teams weeks in the history of the NFL. They allowed 6 yards per play to the Titans, which is way above their season high. They lost Aiden Hutchinson, who might be the most important player to an individual defense right now. I think the second order effects of that injury, he was generating an absurd amount of pressure himself, and it also makes the secondary a lot weaker when you don't have a guy generating as much quick pressure. And they're very vulnerable. And I would be extremely concerned about this defense. They've allowed a lot of production, but it hasn't really mattered considering some of the offense's house. And also that game against the Titans was just so fluky on the special team side of things that I don't think the market's kind of caught up to the fact that this is, I think, a bad defense right now. And then on the flip side, I don't know who's playing quarterback for the Packers. I don't know if it's Jordan Love. I kind of prefer it be Malik Willis, which is a crazy thing for me to say. And when Malik Willis came in the first time, I was the first one to be like, Malik Willis is the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. But you got to update to new information. It was a small sample size. This is also a small sample size, but it appears that LaFleur and this offense can kind of work around that. And then when you look at the Lions defense on the rush side of things, they have been one of the best units in football. But when you add in a quarterback like Malik Willis, who can do so much himself, and the gravity he pulls with Josh Jacobs in the backfield and how defenses have to adjust to Malik Willis. And I think this is a running game that has a high floor and can even run the ball against the Lions. And then you add if he's going to pass as well as he has against a pretty bad defense, there's certainly a case to be made on the Packers side. The last note I'll make here, and I apologize for going so long, is that the Packers defense has been one of the best units in the NFL over the last 5-6 weeks. And it's one thing to kind of cherry pick a little sample here. It's another thing to do that when you have a defense with a new defensive coordinator as the team is learning their scheme. I would certainly like the case more for Green Bay if Jair Alexander does play. He's questionable at the moment. But this is a defense that has been great. And they're playing against some very good offenses. that they can perhaps slow down this Lions team. I just think when you add all of these things up, the base rates on Green Bay at home by more than a field goal is too many points right now.
Hey, is it too many points for you, Doug?
I'm torn because I think the Malik Willis variable is certainly intriguing, and there's a giant unknown, right? This one was, I think, 1.5 on the look ahead that opened 4 after the Love injury at the end of the game. Detroit's obviously score last weekend very misleading. Not to say that they couldn't have driven the field on the Titans if it was just a regular punt return or whatever, but the special teams was an outlier performance. Now the question is, are we going to get Detroit's good version, and are they going to have to prepare for each quarterback and Packers? And like I said, I'm torn. I got about 12 or 14 to 1 on Matthew LaFleur out of Florida to win the Coach of the Year. So this is a big sort of game, the division, and obviously making chicken salad out of chicken, with Malik Willis also speaks to a coaching ability too. So I'm torn on this game, but I think just pure talent and taking a line value, if you will, if Jordan Love is unable to go. He was pretty nicked up, and there was huge steam against the Packers going into the weekend, and it's not like he took a big hit. So I wonder that if there was known injury beforehand going into this, because it was a awkward move, but it wasn't anything that he could have injured a growing on. So it may have been a re-injury, something like that. So I just wonder what the status is of Love, limitations. And then the Lions are a pretty potent offensive unit, as Judah mentioned. So for me, if I can get 3 on the Lions, I'd lay it. Maybe just trying to look for some line value, a line adjustment on Sunday if Love is officially ruled out. But this could be sort of the rubber meets the road for Malik Willis.
Okay, Lions -3 or pass for Doug, that is, and Judah strong on the Packers being the right side there. Moving on to another divisional matchup here. The Rams at the Seahawks. Again, you're looking at the Rams thinking they probably need to win this game. Rams 179 favorites. Seattle 2.22. Seattle getting a 2-point head start and 48.5. Well, 48 now is the total. It was 48.5 this morning. Doug, where are you with these two teams as they try and get one over a divisional rival?
Yeah, I'm on the over. I think we see some points similar to what we saw with Seattle and the 49ers earlier this year. The Rams can, their offense can handle their own, put up plenty of points. Obviously, they're a much different team with their receiving core getting healthier than they were at the beginning of the season. Kyron Williams scores every game as well. And Seattle, we'll see about Metcalf, but they're going to be fine against this Rams defense. This Rams defense, nothing to write home about this year. This Rams vibe, so to speak, has been tough to sort of get a handle on, but I don't think they're kind of an elite group, and this line has a feeling of landing in the low 40s or an absolute shootout. So I think the floor on this is in the low 40s and could very well go under, obviously. And then I think it has a going back and forth because Seattle can move the ball. If Geno has a clean pocket, he's letting it rip just fine. And we've seen that in certain games, like against the Falcons or against the Lions on that Monday night game. So I think we're going to see that version of Geno, and, this offense can move. And I think they're going to be a nice bounce back sort of bet on spot for the Seahawks.
Okay, yeah, strong play there on the over. Judah, no bet for you here, but I mean, set up the NFC West. We've got 3 teams on 4-4 somehow, and the Rams being 3-4, just 1 game back. But this is massive for them. They could be almost joint top by the end of the day.
Yeah, pretty crazy how quickly things can change. And it was the Niners for sure, and then the Seahawks were kind of the next closest team, and then all of a sudden you just got a cluster of teams. Yeah, I think that the market's got this one pretty much right. I would like to see the injury report on the Seattle side, just because they've been dealing with so many injuries aside from DK Metcalf, the secondary, the defensive line. If they can start to get a lot of pieces back, I think the defense can look a little bit closer, not entirely, to the unit that was so good in the first month of the season rather than the last month that's been one of the most vulnerable in the NFL. The Rams usually on and off splits are very noisy. There are a lot of confounding factors, such as who you're playing, and it can kind of be capturing something other than the thing it's actually trying to capture, which is the on-off split. But we have a really big sample now, given how much the Rams have dealt with injuries and how infrequently these guys have all, or I should say, it's almost been 50-50 how much these guys are healthy or not. But the Rams on-off splits with a healthy Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua They are like by far the best offense in the NFL with all those guys healthy, and are just like a middling to bottom unit when those guys are hurt. All three of those guys are in, and I think that we should be sensitive, and I think the market is considering that they are road favorites here. Just how good this offense can be. So I agree with Doug that the over has some potential here, just given how good the Rams offense is, and that their defense is a unit that struggles, and Geno Smith is a quarterback relatively sensitive to his opponent. But again, I really want to see the Seahawks injury report before pulling the trigger on any bet here.
Okay, yeah, we will move on to any other bets. InsideStopMatchWick.com if you want a full recap of these bets coming up, or the bets we've just covered there. That'll be available from Thursday morning. Doug, you have a few here. I mean, the Titans host the Patriots here, and you're going to lay the points here?
At least looking at it.
Are you okay, Doug?
Concussion protocol is a factor because I think it's a giant drop-off to Jacoby Brissett. May does a lot of things. He's young, obviously, but he has much more upside than Jacoby Brissett. I think that goes without saying. So it's caught my eye, and we talked about that Titans game last week. Very misleading. Mason Rudolph much better than Will Levis. So I think there probably could be some line value, but I've definitely gone down the road of laying points with Tennessee earlier this season. So I'm reluctant a little bit. I think the Ravens, look, off that loss, bounce back spot. Denver's been, playing well lately, but some of this is opponent based, right? You obviously got the Panthers last week with Bryce Young, the Saints game with their mess on that Thursday night, all those injuries, particularly on defense. They lose to the Chargers at home, which was sort of like cream rising to the top, a true game. And then the Raiders stink, but that was a Surtain pick to make it 10-10 instead of 17-3 that Minshew threw. And then the Jets debacle. So I like Denver. I had them last week, but I think this is a game where Baltimore gets right and can open up a can on this Broncos team. And Bo Nix does have some limitations. So that's kind of where I'm going. I like the Eagles a little bit. This Jags team's ravaged with the injury at the wide receiver position, and they're a mess to begin with. Nice sneaky cover last week, but this could be a tough spot for them. So those are the games I've been, circled, so to speak.
Okay, we'll get back to that Eagles-Jags game in a minute, Judah. But go to me, and you're going to lay the points with the Commanders at the New York Giants.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised at this line. I think I guess the market is extremely slow to update to Washington. I think this is, if not the best offense, the second best offense in the NFL. They didn't score a ton of points against the tough Bears defense, I would add. But that's a function of like red zone inefficiency, which I think is pretty fluky. They moved the ball incredibly well. Jaden Daniels had 350 passing yards on that many attempts. They were running the ball for 6 yards a carry. They're an absolute house on offense. And I think kind of one of the underlying storylines, I guess, is that Washington's defense, which coming into the season was projected to be one of the worst units in the NFL, and through the first 3-4 weeks, it looked like it would be one of the worst units in the NFL, has been terrific over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And again, like we talked about with Green Bay, it's one thing for that to happen to just some random sample that's likely a function of matchups and things of that variety. But they've got a new defensive coordinator, a new head coach and defensive scheme in Dan Quinn. And this is a guy who, as defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, has been obviously the talent was different there, but has been has led one of the best defenses in the NFL. It's not that surprising that a team, as they get more comfortable in scheme, improves as the season goes along. And their pressure rates over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, again, not just against cupcake matchups, but against some good teams, has been one of the best in the NFL. They are top 10 in pressure rate and quick pressure rate, things of that variety. Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler both have incredible numbers right now. At edge, there are some actual talent. Those guys were both darlings, I would add, of a lot of the advanced data over the last couple of years. And I just see this as a defense that is much better than the market's anticipating. And against this Giants offensive line, we saw it in the second half of the Monday night game. The Giants were just afraid to have any standard dropbacks, and your offense is very, very limited when you can do that. So I think when you add everything up, points are real points in real games. And I think Washington's offense is going to score at will against the Giants defense, which can't stop the run. and is struggling on the pass front too when you can kind of get past their quick pressure. And Jaden Daniels has been one of the best at doing that. I think the offense should be able to score, and I think the defense can generate enough pressure to sack Daniel Jones, stall a bunch of drives. I think the market is really, really slow to update to Washington as a legit candidate, if not the best team in the NFC right now.
Okay, wow, yes, so we're sticking with that Commanders train, and surprisingly, the prices in leased and buy market hasn't moved here, according to Judah. Let's move on to long shots, and maybe back to you, Judah, because Doug mentioned this game already, but also you landed the Patriots money line versus the Jets at around 3-1, 4.0 last week, so no pressure here. Doug says the Jags concerned about the injuries. Why do you think they're a play here on the money line of 4.0 against a Philadelphia team that looked quite decent towards the second half against the Bengals?
Yeah, I think Philadelphia is a team where you're really going to, and we talked about this last week, where you really want to bet on them in spots where teams can't generate a lot of pressure, like Cincinnati, who struggled in that category. And I don't think Jacksonville is in that type. But when you also look at kind of where the market's pricing this game, when you look at a 7.5 point favorite, it's one thing to bet on, let's say, Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell against the Cincinnati Bengals to win outright, right? It's going to require, I think, a lot of variance, and it's extremely, extremely unlikely that one of those quarterback outplays the one on the other side. But with a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, I don't think it is unthinkable, and I think it's even relatively likely that he, in a one-game sample, can outplay Jalen Hurts and can really put the team on his back. And when you've got 7.5 points, yes, they lost Christian Kirk. I think Brian Thomas is questionable, but they have depth at wide receiver. And this is an Eagles defense that has really, really struggled this year, especially when they themselves can't generate a lot of pressure. They're top 5 in that category. But Lawrence has, again, done a good job mitigating that, and especially when he's getting rid of the ball quickly, as he's done a lot more in recent weeks. I think this is a Jaguars offense that can have plenty of success. And again, given the pricing, it's just not that unlikely, I think, for the offense, given this matchup, to outplay the Eagles, and 7.5 is just too much.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not playing mate necessarily on the 7.5, but look, maybe at that money line at 4.0. Doug, over to you. I mean, this is even more of a stretch at 4.5. The Bucks, Ravage also with injuries, I guess. So make the case why you think it could be just worth having a small saver on the Bucks this week at the Kansas City.
Obviously they've been hit hard in the wide receiver position, but that almost kind of keeps opposing defenses second guessing, right? They don't know what the heck's going to go on. But this is more about Kansas City being, this isn't college football. Teams don't run the table. So when is Kansas City going to stub their toes? They're coming off 2 really kind of emotional wins, right? They had the high-profile game against the 49ers on the road. Then come to Vegas. Raiders were sort of rallying around, the little Kermit the Frog stuff and all that. And then the Chiefs sort of escape. And they've been limping a little bit in some of these wins. And I just wonder if how much is left on the or left in the gas tank right now. You got they got the Broncos on deck in the division. But I just wonder if it's a couple draining spots, and then can Baker Mayfield handle the Spagnuolo pass rush? That definitely gives me concern. But there's enough weapons, like passing game out of the backfield to both backs, Bucky, and I it's one of those where it's like it's worth the trade off of the price. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but with that payout, I think it's a good little nibble there.
Yeah, that's what the section is all about. And I love backing a couple of those underdogs there. And the Colts nearly landed for you at one stage, and Doug as well. So let's move on to best bets here. And we landed it. Doug landed the over 41.5 last week. So with the Patriots Jets game. So they're going for team total this week. So for 4 in a row in this section, take it away.
It's Baltimore. I think they have an extremely high-powered offense. And like I talked about earlier, they're a focused favorite, right? So they're going to come against this Denver defense that is obviously highly regarded, but can it handle the Ravens' firepower, which is obviously even making moves this week? And there's just a lot to like with Baltimore, and the scheduling ebb and flow of a season. You want to bet on them in a situation. Now, they had a relatively low total last week facing Cleveland, and that game obviously went over with Jameis, getting that offense clicking with the Browns. But this Denver team, they're going to be able to move the ball against Baltimore. Baltimore's got a leaky defense. Bo Nix can do some things. They'll stretch the defense, throw deep, probably get some points on field goals too. At once Bo Nix rips off a long run. But I think this Ravens team, and they don't really take their foot off the gas, even when protecting a lead. They can stretch it. So I think Baltimore, to ask them to get to like 30, I think that's more, that's a reasonable ask, even against a Broncos defense that's, well respected. But they can put up plenty of points here.
Okay, team total around 27.5 currently on Matchbook is 186. Jude, a final word to you. You're laying points and alternative points with the Atlanta Falcons, who are hosts the Arizona Cardinals this week.
Yeah, I think that, the Falcons are hosting the Cowboys. This is a Cowboys defense that I've really been wanting to attack. I think Micah Parsons is still going to miss this game, or at least is on the wrong side of questionable right now. And so all non-Deshaun Watson offenses, this is a team that's allowing like 10 yards per attempt. This is also one of the worst rushing rush defenses in the NFL. And when you look at a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, you want to back him in spots where he kind of has the situational advantage, where he has kind of kept clean. And the Micah Parsons, without Micah Parsons, the Cowboys have been generating basically no disruption or plays that have perfect coverage or kind of take a quarterback away from his progression by virtue of generating pressure early enough. And Cousins has some of the most drastic splits. When he's kind of kept clean, he's been producing at a top 5 clip and has a bottom 5 clip when things get a little messy. And I just don't see how the Falcons how the Cowboys are going to generate enough disruption given the state of their defensive line and given the state of their secondary. Everything to me points to the Falcons being able to put up points. And on the Cowboys side, the Falcons are particularly vulnerable. They have not been able to generate pressure at all. And I just don't see that right now. The Cowboys do not have anyone to get open. Post this chart of like single coverage rates and their separation. And Jalen Tolbert is seeing a ton of single coverage. He cannot generate separation. When they don't have CeeDee Lamb going for 175 yards, they just lack the secondary weapons to get going. And I don't think that Dallas is going to be able to take advantage of the matchup against Atlanta. I'm more than comfortable kind of laying the points here, especially on the alt line with Atlanta at 5.5.
Okay, Atlanta minus 5.5 against the Cowboys. Judah's best bet on the card. We are done. Insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all the guys' picks. And a reminder, if you are watching or listening, or wherever you're watching or listening, do hit that like button, follow or subscribe completely for free. Enjoy the weekend's NFL. We'll chat to you next week. Bye-bye.